Hi everyone, I'm Carl Azus. We're kicking off a new week and 10 minutes of commercial-free current events. First up, President Obama is postponing his planned executive order on immigration. Now let's break this down. An executive order is a policy, a directive that presidents can issue on their own. It doesn't go through Congress, but it's more limited than laws that do. With Congress divided between Democrats and Republicans and compromise not in the air, President Obama has issued nearly 200 executive orders, some on controversial issues. He'd promised to give a new one on immigration before the end of the summer, but he now says he'll wait until after the midterm elections. The president says this will give him more time to explain his decision to the public. But some analysts call this a political move, saying he's trying to keep divisive issues from hurting his fellow Democrats in November's congressional elections. Some groups that support immigration reform say he needs to take action now, and some lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, say he needs to go through Congress to reform immigration law. A strategic dam in Iraq, a terrorist group trying to get control, U.S. airstrikes called in to help Iraqi forces. Sound familiar? This same scenario played out last month at a dam in the Tigris River. Yesterday, it happened at the Euphrates River. Iraqi forces have been fighting ISIS, or Islamic State, in Iraq and Syria. It's the terrorist group trying to get control of strategic places like the Haditha Dam. It provides water to millions of people in western and southern Iraq, so the last thing Iraqis in the U.S. want is for it to fall into the hands of ISIS.
We know much more about ISIS now than we did a few months ago. We know how brutal they can be, how well-financed, how powerful, but what we don't know about ISIS would still fill volumes. For starters, how big is their fighting force? On the low end of the estimates, you get around 10,000 people. On the high end, around 80,000. This is in part because ISIS is forming alliances with people who share their radical ideology. Now, does that make these other groups members of ISIS or just temporary partners in crime? We can't really say. How much land does ISIS control? Again, if you look at some maps, you see relatively thin sections of northern Iraq and Syria under ISIS control. But if you expand to say, let's talk about all the areas where ISIS has influence or followers, then you start picking up places like Jordan and Lebanon and even Europe and the United States. It's hard to say how many of those people are dedicated to it or if that represents real influence by ISIS. What does ISIS want? They want a caliphate. This would be a country, a state, ruled by a supreme religious leader who enforces strict Islamic law on the people underneath this person. Now, they want to have this, right now it appears, in the area spanning Iraq and Syria along that border. But the question is, will they be satisfied with that? If they get that country, would they then want more land, more people, more power? Do they have designs on striking the United States? There have been videos that suggest that ISIS leaders would like to raise their flag over the White House. We don't know how much of that is actual planning and how much of it is bluster, but security experts say it all has to be taken very seriously. And finally, that brings up the big question. What can anyone do about these terrorists? Because despite airstrikes and talk about international cooperation, this remains the biggest unknown about ISIS.
A healthy and full lake in Northern California. There's only one problem. This picture is 3 years old.
And now I'm walking on top of that very same bridge. Take a look. It is a virtual desert. This is what drought looks like in the state of California.
And not just any drought. California is more than 2 years into the worst drought in its recorded history. Its governor has declared a state of emergency. Farmers have lost their crops. New research published in the journal Nature suggests that the drying up of groundwater in the Central Valley could change pressure in the earth and trigger more earthquakes. Experts say they'll be small, not much damage, but the drought's damage has been done.
Where I'm standing is a powerful symbol of California's crippling drought. This is Lake Mendocino in Northern California, and it's pretty much dried up. Normally you'd see people out in the water using their boats, but right now it's just pretty much a desert. The lack of rain has pushed nearly 80% of the state into either extreme or exceptional drought categories. Those are the highest levels. And most of the major reservoirs, the water that sustains so many communities throughout the state, those are less than half full. It's so dry that thieves are actually stealing water. A father and daughter living off a water tank in the Central Valley say they've been ripped off 8 times.
It's horrible. We go without showering. We can't flush our toilets. We can't wash our hands.
At Hearst Castle, a popular attraction for tourists, they had to drain the reflective Neptune pool early. The sparkling blue water has given way to a skateboarder's fantasy. The drought also having an impact on food prices. Meat and produce rising as much as 6% according to the USDA. Fast food chains like Chipotle and In-N-Out Burger have raised their prices. We're also seeing a new phenomenon with so-called drought busters, people combing through communities looking for water wasters, leaky sprinklers, things of that nature. And public parks, some cities are no longer watering the grass, and you can see brown patches in places like Santa Barbara along the waterfront. It's been a very long summer, and there's just no end in sight for this drought.
To request a mention right here, go to our transcript page at cnnstudentnews.com. Today's schools from east to west: Scarborough Middle School in Scarborough, Maine, where the Red Storm is brewing. Welsh High School in Welsh, Louisiana, where the Greyhounds outrun everybody. And Granite Bay High School in Granite Bay, California, no one's messing with Grizzlies. Star Wars gave us speeders, Back to the Future Part 2 gave us hoverboards, the Jetsons gave us a flying car, at least gave us the dream of these things. The next step, a real one, may just be the hover bike. An engineer is turning 2 wheels into fans, and he's well aware that if his idea doesn't fly, a similar one might.
When I was younger, I always wanted to fly. I was always drawing different flying vehicles, always dreamt about building my own.
Chris Malloy is an engineer. His passion is making things fly.
I invented a hover bike that has all the properties of a helicopter and flies like a helicopter, but has the freedom and look of a motorcycle.
This is a scale model of our full-size hover bike. It produces thrust and hovers like a helicopter by pushing air down with its propellers. In order to move forward, we decrease the thrust on the front and increase the thrust on the rear, and same to go backwards. In order to rotate, we change the speed of the propellers, whilst keeping the thrust the same.
Malloy always starts out by using scale models. Pop a camera on one and you get a sense of what it might be like to fly the real thing. Malloy is well aware that he has competition, that he's in a hoverbike race. Teams in Los Angeles and the Czech Republic are also developing hoverbikes, but Malloy believes his machine will be the most versatile.
Our hoverbike is different because it's been designed as an aerial workhorse. It's not designed as a toy. So we can deploy it in emergency areas. Our new design is autonomous, so it can ferry goods and people in without there needing to be a pilot.
More manned test flights are planned in the next few months. Malloy will again be the test pilot, the first, he hopes, of the true hover cyclists.
Another invention today. It's been said that a man's home is his castle. And while this one may not be big enough to live in, it is real, it is made of concrete, it was constructed by a 3D printer. A big one made out of chains, rails, and motors. The contractor's invention lays out concrete in whatever patterns he programs. He hopes it'll be the future of construction, capable of printing a 3,600 square foot house in about a week. That would leave an imprint on construction. Imagine setting designs on something like that, fashioning a concrete plan and building on the idea of a printed house. That's an engineering feat that breaks down walls, y'all. CNN Student News is back tomorrow with more current events and probably more puns.